Good day. Today I'd like to show you one of my favorite dry stonefly patterns, and I tie it in various sizes. I'm going to tie a smaller size today that I use for squallas and smaller stoneflies, but I also tie this in much larger sizes for the giant golden stones and also the Terra narcissus, the salmon flies. So it's kind of a neat pattern. You just vary the size and proportions of everything, and seems to work really well. It's got lots of foam in it, so it floats good. So I have in the vise here a Chamco 2312 long shank dry fly hook, and I prefer the ring eye, straight eye for this particular pattern. You'll see why maybe in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to attach the thread up behind the eye and coat the hook shank. Get my scissors out here and we'll trim that off. And we'll run it all the way down to a point just above the barb, and then we'll bring it back up to a point maybe about a third of the way back the hook shank, a third up here and 2/3 down here. And this is where we're going to tie in our body. And the body material we're going to use here is some sheet foam. And for squallas, I either tie it in a dark brown like this or an olive green. I also tie a golden stone in this size as well, a smaller size golden stone. But we'll tie that in right there, so it's right on top of the hook shank. We're going to fold it back over so it leaves a little bit of an extended body out here. And we will come back and tie that in on top of right where we initially attached the foam. Trim this off. And what we're going to do now is go spiral our way back down the body here to secure it to the hook shank and also give it some segments. So we're just going to bring our head thread so it's straight up above the hook, kind of go back on about a 45-degree angle and go around that body and the hook shank and tighten it down good, and we're going to just continue doing that down the hook shank. And we'll do one more here. So we end up with 4 segments there. Now we're just going to do the same thing, work our way back up the shank, or the hook rather, and just cross it on top like that. Turn or two, cross it on top. And we have these X patterns on top here, but we're going to cover that up here in just a second. There's a few layers of wing material on this, and the first layer we're going to put on is this. This is Montana Fly Company Flex Wing, it's called. It's a sheet thing. This has got a neat little pattern in it that kind of comes close to imitating the veins of the wings of these stoneflies. And I'm just going to take my scissors and cut off a strip of this. And the width of this strip, of course, depends on the size of the fly you're tying. Wouldn't want to go any wider than this for this squalla. That might even be a tad wide. For the bigger flies, wider, of course. Then I'm going to take this thing and I want to fold it in half lengthwise. And once I've done that, I'm going to come up here and just make some cuts. First is a long angle cut there, then I'll just nip that corner off, and that's just to give us the shape of the end of the wing of the stoneflies when they're at rest, because they fold them flat over their back. So we're going to lay that on top of the hook shank, decide how long we want to come out here, just a little bit past the body. We're going to come back up here and just mark it where we want to cut it off, and we will cut it off before we tie it onto the hook shank. Bring it back, put it in position, and tie it down. So that's the first layer of our wing for our stonefly pattern. The next layer is just going to be some natural elk hair that we're going to use to tie on here. And you don't need too awful much of it. This is partly for visibility, I think. and partly to help float it. So trim a little bit of little clump of elk fibers off here. Get rid of that real long one. Get rid of the short fibers and fuzzy under fur. I'm going to take and put this in a hair stacker and even up the natural ends of these fibers. So I have a little bit neater looking package of fibers there, and I'm going to position this on top so that it's about even with the back of the body, I guess, maybe. Change hands, come down here and decide where, okay, I'm going to cut it off right about here. And I like cutting elk and deer hair and moose fibers off before I tie them on. What it does is it allows you to get a kind of a nice taper down through here, instead of having a big step where you cut it off after you tie it on. So there's our second section of our wing. The third piece of material that's going on the wing is this stuff. And I just started adding this. I didn't always put this on, but I started adding this lately just for more visibility. This is put out by the Wapsie company. They call it a parapost wing. And it's a polypropylene type material. And so I'm just going to lay it on there. Take 2 or 3 turns there, fold that piece back, take another 2 or 3 turns on top of that. And this is our last layer of our wing. And as I mentioned, I started using this just for visibility. I do fish some stonefly hatches really early in the morning in dim light sometimes. And that just makes it a bit more visible. The last step on this is to put a head on this, and we're gonna, if you look at the video, the squala was a slightly lighter color than the body, so this is a slightly lighter brown. We're just gonna take this piece of foam, we're gonna take our scissors and poke a hole in it, about a 1/2 inch down from the end. We're gonna take that hole and slide it over the eye of the hook. It says here in the book, there we go. And we'll take that short end and put it underneath and fold that long end over the top. And this is going to be used to form the head of this fly. So we're just going to take a couple of turns there, kind of squeeze things down on both sides to try to close up this little gap here if you can. And once that's in place, we'll take 2 or 3 or 4 good tight wraps on that. And then the last step is going to be to put the legs on this thing. And for the legs on this one, I've used brown, I've used all kinds of things, barred ones, and these are kind of a barred orange and black deal. And what we're going to do is what I've done is I've just taken this, fold it in half, and I'll cut it down at the bottom of the loop here, and we'll tie one on one side and one on the other. And we can then adjust them to length after we're tied on. So I'll tie one on this side. Some guys like using flies with great big long rubber legs that wiggle a bunch. And I don't mind, but I don't like them quite this long. But we'll trim them down here after we're done. So we'll tie one on the other side so it's kind of in the middle of that head there. And we'll fold them out front so they're kind of even, and just trim them both off at the same time. And the back ones maybe we'll leave a little bit longer. And we'll put a whip finish on at that point, and then we're almost done. I use this style of whip finisher. Allows me to get in, put a whip finish on behind that head without tying down legs and other things. And I'll put 2 whip finishes on there, or 4 or 5 turns each. And we'll get rid of that thread. I'm going to come back up here now. We're just going to trim off this long piece, and I don't mind leaving a bit of a collar here. Just sticking up there a little bit. Kind of helps control that wing a little bit. The last step then is to take it out of the vise and trim off that foam that's sticking down underneath here, and we want to trim this off as short as we can. Try not to amputate any legs. And there we have a foam stonefly pattern that I like to tie. This is to imitate a squala, but like I say, I do tie them bigger to imitate giant golden stones and salmon flies and so on.